go to
Troops, I saw a bear here. Today, we'll be talking about Update 29 for Foxhole. This update sees a lot of weapon and vehicle models redone so that they have models for both factions, and adds a lot of fun explosives to the wars. First up, the transport bus is making its glorious return. Now, Wardens and Colonials have access to the transport bus from their vehicle factories. This is no longer a relic vehicle, and 2 different models have been made for Wardens and Colonials. Additionally, the field artillery and field machine guns now have Warden and Colonial specific models. Speaking of vehicles, let's talk about logistics a little bit. Now, production parts are no longer required to produce any of the vehicles. While the cost for the vehicles remains the same as if you were producing production parts for them, this eliminates that extra annoying step of having to go to the construction yard, getting the parts, going to the vehicle factory, delivering those parts, and then building the vehicle. Now you can just build the vehicle directly. Additionally, crate icons now have a sub-icon that identifies the contents within the crate. That makes it easy at a glance to see if a crate's carrying revolver ammo versus soldier supplies. The hover tooltips now also show the quantity of items contained within that crate. The stockpile UIs at stockpile centers now also show its current capacity and its ultimate stockpile limit. Factories and ammo factories, refineries, and storage depots now have a much larger use area. That means you don't have to be sitting right at the gate or right at the doors in order to use it. You can spread out a little bit, which hopefully alleviates some of the traffic jams we've been seeing around logistic towns. But if that wasn't enough, logistic towns such as Weathering Halls and other important logistical centers have all had their layouts optimized for better traffic flow. There's large open square areas around these important supply centers, so traffic jams should hopefully be a thing of the past, unless your drivers are really bad. You'll notice the maps look differently than they did before. Allow me to explain these changes. First off, each region within Foxhole has been subdivided into what are known as zones. Second, border forts no longer exist, but some of them have been repurposed. Within each one of these individual zones is now a place of importance, usually some sort of capture point. So that means a town hall, or a new zone fort, or something else of significant importance. Once these areas have been captured, the zone will be labeled under your faction's color to indicate that you've captured them. This allows for much easier and noticeable changes in the front line. But there's a bit more to it than that. With the introduction of frontier bases, these are how you'll be invading enemy territories from now on. Frontier bases can only be built around region borders. Additionally, they can only be built if you have a zone adjacent to that region that you're invading. Take this map, for example. This frontier fort is built here, but only because we control the zone adjacent to this region. Frontier bases also decay very quickly. They're only meant for jumping off points, so make sure you have a good invasion force with you. The last big change comes to spawning. From here on out, home bases, aka the star bases, and wild spawns, as well as the essential idea of infinite respawns, has been removed. Now, troops will have 2 spawn points they can select independently of each other: the home base and the forward base spawns. Forward base spawn points include things like forward operating bases, FOBs, or keeps. They're pretty straightforward and just as you remember them. And if you spawn at your now home base, these forward base spawns will be removed and you'll have to reset them again, as it was before. The home base spawn points are where it gets interesting. These include things like town halls, zone forts, frontier bases, and deployed landing ships. Every spawn will now cost you spawn supplies, so value your lives. Additionally, if your current home base was destroyed, you will be able to select a nearby home base as your spawn point. And in the larger cities, a nearby safe house will become available to spawn at if your home base is destroyed. This should give city defenders a better chance once the main defensive walls are breached. Now here's one other caveat with the home base system. When you're first deploying into a region, you will be given a select few home bases where you can choose to spawn. These are based off of 2 factors. garrison size, and garrison activity. Now these aren't items soldiers have to produce and supply per se. Think of it more like a voting system. The more players choose a home base as their spawn point, the higher the garrison size becomes, and the more players actively spawn there, the more the garrison activity increases. And these will factor in the decision-making process of where you'll be able to spawn when you first enter a region. So think of it this way. If a large amount of players have moved up from one town to another and select this new town as their home base, this becomes the new home base for new soldiers entering that region. Essentially, it does away with the old static home base system and introduces a bit more flexibility and more soldier choice with this new deployment system. Of course, it's not going to be perfect for every situation. If soldiers abandon a base for too long, it will become completely inactive, and soldiers will have to travel there the old-fashioned way on roads in order to set their spawns there. Okay, now that we see how the maps are laid out, let's talk about artillery. Oh yes, let's start from small to large. Mortars now have two new shell types. The shrapnel shell is a shell that explodes into shrapnel on impact, devastating nearby infantry, although it won't do as much damage to vehicles or buildings. More of a support tool, but definitely one of my favorites, is the mortar flare shell. That's right, this is a shell that ignites mid-air and illuminates a large area, revealing enemy targets and just the general landscape for a decent amount of time. Jumping up now, we've got the field artillery. The field artillery is now equipped with two more additional shell types. Armor-piercing shells, as the name would suggest, are designed to penetrate heavy armor. These will wreak havoc on tank crews if you can nail a shot right on them. And secondly is the high explosive shells. These are specifically anti-structure shells that will detonate a high-yield explosive charge on impact. You can kiss those sweet defenses bye-bye. And lastly is the howitzer. The howitzer now has two shell types, largely support, but definitely devastating in their own right. First off is the smoke rounds. This is a shell that emits a thick cloud of smoke that lingers for a prolonged period, providing a lot of visual cover for infantry pushes. Now these are still shells, so any infantry caught in the blast radius will still be damaged by these shells. These are great for pushing defenses or covering corridors where friendly infantry need to pass. And lastly, oh, war crimes are always the best, aren't they? Lastly is the green ash shell. It's a shell that emits a large amount of lethal gas, poisoning nearby infantry. This affects a pretty large area, so you better have a lot of gas masks and a lot of filters on hand. Now, all these new shell types will be somewhat costly when it comes to their pricing in terms of resources. However, it's important to note that a lot of the standard rounds for tanks and artillery have been reduced or have switched to a lower grade material requirement. So some of the game balances include 40mm rounds now cost 120 explosive materials instead of 60 high explosive materials to produce. 75mm rounds now cost 400 explosive materials instead of 200 high explosive materials to produce. Additionally, storm rifles now cost 20 refined materials to produce. Flatbed trucks no longer require any refined material to produce and now cost 150 basic materials. Freighters no longer require refined materials to produce and only cost 175 basic materials. Armored car refined material cost has increased from 25 to 40, and the landing APC refined material cost has increased from 15 to 20. However, the landing APC health has actually increased by 100%, so essentially double the health. These should make them more durable and, actually able to make it to a beachhead. Half-track health and damage has increased by 20%, light tank health has increased by 20%, and the gun nest health has been decreased by a further 15%. Some other changes include the home region design has been very much reworked to provide a better experience for new soldiers on the front. Tutorial areas have been fully updated and expanded, and more tools for the players are available to help them train. I assume we'll still be seeing a lot of tutorial sessions run by the vets, but this should make it easier for getting a lot of the basic points across if there's not a vet to help the new soldiers out. Various sound changes have been implemented, including a day or night cycle for some of the birds and audio. And spindly, leafless bushes, specifically in the northern regions, no longer act as concealment, so you cannot hide in these. There were some bug fixes along this update, but I'll save that for the patch notes down below. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you saw in this update video, like, subscribe, and share this with all the frontline soldiers out there. And all the artillery officers, of course. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear this news. And as always, good luck, keep your heads down, and stay in your foxholes. Bear out. Oh, what the hell? My game crashed. Foxhole, why?